The crystal chandeliers of the Golden Crown restaurant cast a warm glow over the city's most elite gathering. 200 of the wealthiest individuals in the state have come together for the annual charity gala, their designer gowns and tailored suits creating a sea of understated luxury. The air buzzes with polite conversation about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Maya Johnson moves gracefully between the tables, her crisp white shirt and black apron marking her as temporary help for the evening. At 25, she carries herself with a quiet dignity that seems almost out of place in her role as a server. Her dark eyes are alert, observant, taking in every detail of the conversations around her as she refills water glasses and clears plates. At table 7 sits Richard Blackstone, a man whose very presence commands attention. At 50, he has built a technology empire worth billions, and his cold blue eyes survey the room like a predator assessing territory. His platinum watch catches the light as he gestures dismissively at the waiter who has just served him the wrong wine. "This is a 2015 Bordeaux, you incompetent fool," Blackstone snarls, his voice carrying across nearby tables. "I specifically ordered the 2012. Do you people even know how to read?" Maya approaches table 7 with a fresh bottle of the correct vintage, her movements careful and deliberate. She sets the bottle down gently and begins to pour, but in that moment, someone at the adjacent table bumps into her chair. The burgundy liquid splashes across Blackstone's pristine white shirt and onto his $20,000 Italian vest. The restaurant falls silent. Every conversation stops. Every eye turns to witness what happens next. Blackstone's face turns purple with rage as he leaps to his feet. "You stupid monkey," he roars, his voice echoing through the suddenly quiet restaurant. "I knew it! You people are all the same. Clumsy, worthless, good for nothing but destroying everything you touch." Maya stands perfectly still, her face a mask of calm that seems almost otherworldly in its composure. The wine glass remains steady in her hand as Blackstone continues his tirade. "Look at this," he gestures wildly at his stained clothing. $20,000 ruined by some ghetto trash who doesn't belong in civilized society. Where's the manager? Get this animal out of my sight." The restaurant manager, a nervous man in his 50s, rushes over, his hands shaking as he approaches the scene. "Mr. Blackstone, I'm so sorry, so very sorry. Maya, you're fired. Get out. Now." Blackstone isn't finished. He steps closer to Maya, his face inches from hers. "You listen to me, you worthless piece of garbage. I don't know what rock you crawled out from under, but you don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere decent people gather. Take your ghetto attitude and get out, before I have security throw you out." The 200 guests watch in stunned silence. Some look uncomfortable, others seem to be enjoying the spectacle. A few pull out their phones, recording the humiliation unfolding before them. Maya slowly unties her apron, her movements deliberate and controlled. She folds it neatly and places it on the table. Then, with a gesture that seems almost ritualistic, she reaches beneath her shirt and pulls out a delicate gold chain. On it hangs a small pendant in the shape of scales, the symbol of justice. She looks directly into Blackstone's eyes, her voice quiet but carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. "I'll remember your face, Mr. Blackstone." There's something in her tone, something in the way she holds herself as she walks toward the exit that makes several guests exchange uncertain glances. This wasn't the reaction of a defeated minimum-wage worker. This was something else entirely. As Maya disappears through the restaurant's doors, Blackstone turns back to his table with a satisfied smirk. "That's how you handle trash," he announces to his companions. "Sometimes you have to remind these people of their place." But the pendant catches the light one last time as the door closes, and in that moment, several of the more observant guests notice that Maya Johnson doesn't walk like someone who has just been humiliated. She walks like someone who has just drawn a line in the sand. Maya Johnson lives in a modest two-bedroom apartment in the Riverside district, a neighborhood that exists in the shadow of the gleaming downtown towers where people like Richard Blackstone conduct their business. The walls are lined with law books, their spines worn from countless hours of study. A small desk sits by the window, covered with legal briefs and case studies that she reviews between her various jobs. Her grandmother, Eleanor Washington, sits in her favorite armchair, a woman of 75 whose silver hair is always perfectly styled and whose dark eyes hold the wisdom of someone who has seen both the worst and best of humanity. She's watching the evening news when Maya comes home that night, still wearing her server's uniform. "How was work, baby?" Eleanor asks, though something in Maya's expression tells her the answer won't be pleasant. Maya sinks into the couch beside her grandmother, her fingers unconsciously playing with the gold chain around her neck. "I got fired, Grandma, but not for the reason you might think." She tells Eleanor about the incident at the Golden Crown, about Richard Blackstone's racist tirade, about the 200 witnesses who watched her humiliation unfold. Eleanor listens without interruption, her weathered hands folded in her lap, but her eyes grow harder with each detail. "Then has no idea what he's just started," Eleanor says quietly when Maya finishes. "Show me the pendant, child." Maya pulls out the small scales of justice, and Eleanor's fingers trace the inscription on the back. "Justice delayed is justice denied." It had belonged to Maya's mother, Sarah Johnson, who died in a car accident when Maya was 16. Sarah had been a civil rights lawyer, fighting for the voiceless and the forgotten, until her life was cut short on a rainy night outside the courthouse where she had just won a case for a family facing housing discrimination. "Your mother wore this pendant every day," Eleanor tells her, though they've had this conversation many times before. "She believed that justice wasn't something that happened to you, it was something you made happen. She would have been proud of how you handled yourself tonight." Maya had grown up in the foster care system after her parents' death, shuffled between homes where she was often the only black child among white families who meant well but never quite understood her experience. She excelled in school despite the challenges, winning a scholarship to community college and then transferring to Harvard for her undergraduate degree. But what few people knew was that she had been secretly pursuing a law degree through Harvard's part-time program, studying online while working multiple jobs to pay for her education. "I'm tired of being quiet, Grandma," Maya says, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'm tired of people like Blackstone thinking they can treat people like me as if we're less than human. I'm tired of working 3 jobs just to afford an education that should be available to everyone." Eleanor nods, understanding. "Then don't be quiet anymore, baby. Your mother's spirit lives in that pendant, and she never backed down from a fight when justice was on the line." On the small table beside Eleanor's chair sits a framed photograph. A young woman in a graduation cap and gown, standing beside a man in a judge's robes. The woman is Sarah Johnson, on the day she graduated from law school. The man is federal Judge Harold Washington, Eleanor's late husband, who had been one of the first black federal judges appointed in their state. Maya looks at the photograph, then at her grandmother. "I've been accepted to 3 top law firms for internships, Grandma. I graduate next month with my JD. I've been keeping it quiet because I wanted to surprise you. But maybe it's time to stop hiding." Eleanor's eyes fill with tears of pride. "Your grandfather would have been so proud. He always said that the law was meant to be a shield for the innocent and a sword for justice. Maybe it's time for you to pick up both." That night, Maya sits at her desk, surrounded by legal textbooks and case files. She pulls out her laptop and begins researching Richard Blackstone, his business practices, his public statements, his political donations. What she finds makes her blood run cold. This isn't the first time Blackstone has been accused of discrimination. There are lawsuits that have been quietly settled, employees who have been silenced by non-disclosure agreements, a pattern of behavior that stretches back decades. She opens a new document and begins typing. "Complaint? For damages under federal civil rights laws. For the first time in her life, Maya Johnson is going to fight back. The next morning brings swift and merciless retaliation. Maya arrives at her second job, a morning shift at a downtown coffee shop, only to find the manager waiting for her with a pink slip and an uncomfortable expression. "I'm sorry, Maya," he says, refusing to meet her eyes. "I got a call this morning. We're letting you go." "A call from who?" Maya asks, though she already knows the answer. "I can't say. I'm sorry." By noon, Maya has been fired from her third job as well, weekend shifts at a catering company. The pattern is clear. Richard Blackstone is using his influence to systematically destroy her ability to earn a living. Phone calls have been made, threats have been implied, and Maya Johnson is being erased from the city's service industry. But Blackstone isn't content with simply getting Maya fired. He wants her utterly destroyed. Within a week, he has hired a private investigator to dig into every aspect of her life. The man discovers that Maya is pursuing a law degree at Harvard, information that sends Blackstone into a rage that his assistant describes as volcanic. "A law degree," Blackstone screams into his phone. "That little ghetto princess thinks she can become a lawyer? We'll see about that." The next call goes to Harvard's administration office. Richard Blackstone is a major donor to the university, his technology company having contributed over $50 million to various programs over the years. When he demands a meeting with the dean, it's granted immediately. "There's been a mistake," Blackstone tells Dean Morrison, a thin man with gray hair who has spent his career navigating the delicate balance between academic integrity and donor relations. "You have a student named Maya Johnson who has been fraudulently obtaining her degree. I have evidence that she's been cheating on her exams. The evidence is fabricated, of course. Screenshots of online forums where someone with Maya's name appears to be discussing test answers, IP addresses that have been manipulated to appear to originate from her computer, testimonials from anonymous classmates who claim to have witnessed her academic dishonesty. Dean Morrison knows the evidence is flimsy, but he also knows that Richard Blackstone's continued support keeps several academic programs afloat. "I'll look into it," he promises. Within days, Maya receives an email that makes her blood run cold. She's been called before the Academic Integrity Board, accused of cheating on her final exams. The hearing is scheduled for the following week, and she's informed that if the charges are substantiated, she'll be expelled, just months before her graduation. Professor Williams, Maya's favorite instructor and the one person at Harvard who truly understands her potential, tries to intervene. "This is ridiculous," he tells the board. "Maya Johnson is one of the most brilliant students I've taught in 20 years. She doesn't need to cheat. She's already at the top of her class." But the board has already made its decision. The pressure from above is too great, the donor's influence too powerful. Maya Johnson is suspended pending investigation, effectively ending her academic career, just as it was about to begin. The news spreads quickly through Maya's neighborhood and beyond. Richard Blackstone, not content with destroying her privately, decides to make her humiliation public. He arranges for a story to be planted in the local newspaper, a publication that receives substantial advertising revenue from his companies. The headline reads, "Local Woman Caught in Academic Fraud Scandal." The article paints Maya as a manipulative opportunist who used her race to gain admission to Harvard and then cheated her way through law school. Anonymous sources claim she has a history of violence and dishonesty, that she's been involved in various schemes to defraud the system. The story is picked up by other media outlets, amplified by social media, and soon Maya Johnson's name is synonymous with academic fraud and racial controversy. Her photograph appears on news websites alongside headlines that question affirmative action policies and debate whether certain people are capable of succeeding in higher education. The harassment extends beyond the digital realm. Maya and Eleanor's apartment is vandalized, racist graffiti spray-painted on their door. Neighbors who have known Maya for years begin to avoid her, crossing the street when they see her coming. The local grocery store where she has shopped for years suddenly treats her with suspicion, following her through the aisles as if she might steal something. Marcus, Maya's boyfriend and a medical student at the local university, finds himself under pressure as well. His parents, both doctors, demand that he end the relationship. "That girl is going to ruin your career," his mother tells him. "You can't be associated with someone like that." When Marcus refuses to abandon Maya, his family threatens to cut off his financial support. The stress of choosing between his family and the woman he loves weighs heavily on him, and Maya can see the strain in his eyes. But Richard Blackstone's cruelest blow comes when he targets Eleanor directly. Using his connections in the city's housing authority, he arranges for their apartment to be inspected for code violations. Suddenly, their home of 15 years is declared uninhabitable due to structural issues that have never existed before. They have 30 days to vacate. Eleanor, who has been Maya's rock through every storm, begins to crack under the pressure. The woman who survived the civil rights era, who raised her granddaughter with dignity and strength, finds herself doubting whether they can survive this assault. "Maybe you should apologize," she tells Maya one evening, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Maybe if you just say you're sorry, he'll leave us alone." Maya looks at her grandmother, the woman who taught her never to bow to injustice, and realizes that Richard Blackstone has achieved something she thought was impossible. He has broken Eleanor Washington's spirit. That night, Maya sits in their nearly empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and the debris of their destroyed lives. She holds the pendant in her hands, staring at the scales of justice that now seem to mock her. Everything she has worked for, everything she has believed in, has been systematically dismantled by one man's cruelty. She thinks about giving up, about disappearing into obscurity, about finding some small town where Richard Blackstone's influence can't reach. But then she remembers her mother's words, spoken years ago but preserved in her heart. "Justice isn't something that happens to you, baby. It's something you make happen." Maya Johnson stands up, wipes her tears, and makes a decision that will change everything. She's going to fight back, not as a victim, but as a lawyer. And she's going to do it in the most public way possible. The next morning, Maya makes a series of phone calls that surprise everyone who receives them. The first is to the local media, announcing that she will be holding a press conference at the Golden Crown restaurant, the same location where her humiliation began. The second is to every civil rights organization in the state, inviting them to attend. The third is to her contact at the FBI's Civil Rights Division, a connection she made through her law school research. But the most important call is to Professor Williams at Harvard. "I need you to trust me," she tells him. "And I need you to be ready to tell the truth, no matter what it costs." Richard Blackstone learns about the press conference through his network of informants and initially laughs at the news. "Let her embarrass herself," he tells his assistant. "The more she talks, the more she'll incriminate herself." But as the day approaches, Blackstone begins to feel uneasy. There's something about Maya Johnson's confidence, something about the way she has orchestrated this event, that doesn't fit the profile of a desperate woman making a last stand. Against his better judgment, he decides to attend the press conference himself. The Golden Crown restaurant is packed with reporters, civil rights activists, and curious onlookers. Maya arrives wearing a sharp black suit and carrying a leather briefcase that seems far too expensive for someone who has been unemployed for weeks. She moves through the crowd with a confidence that makes several people take notice. Richard Blackstone sits in the back of the room, surrounded by his lawyers and security team. He expects to witness Maya's final humiliation, her desperate attempt to salvage her reputation before disappearing into obscurity. Maya approaches the podium that has been set up in the center of the restaurant, the same spot where she was humiliated weeks earlier. She looks out at the assembled crowd, her eyes briefly meeting Blackstone's before she begins to speak. "My name is Maya Johnson," she says, her voice clear and strong. 3 weeks ago, I was working as a server in this restaurant when I was subjected to a racist attack by Richard Blackstone. What happened next was a systematic campaign to destroy my life, my education, and my future. But what Mr. Blackstone doesn't know is that I am not the helpless victim he believes me to be. She opens her briefcase and pulls out a document that makes several reporters lean forward. I am a graduate of Harvard Law School, graduating summa cum laude with a specialization in civil rights law. I have been offered positions at 3 of the most prestigious law firms in the country, and I have spent the last 3 weeks documenting every illegal action Mr. Blackstone has taken in his attempt to destroy me. The room erupts in murmurs and the click of camera shutters. Blackstone's face goes pale as he realizes that his investigation of Maya Johnson was woefully incomplete. Furthermore, Maya continues, I am not just Maya Johnson, law student and waitress. I am Maya Johnson, granddaughter of retired federal judge Harold Washington and Eleanor Washington. My family has been fighting for justice in this country for 3 generations. Professor Williams appears via video link on a large screen behind Maya. Maya Johnson is the most brilliant student I have taught in 20 years at Harvard Law School, he says. The accusations of academic fraud are not only false, they are malicious attacks designed to destroy a young woman whose only crime was being the victim of racism. Maya turns to face Richard Blackstone directly. You used your wealth and influence to try to destroy me because you thought I was powerless. You thought I was just another black woman who would quietly accept your abuse. You were wrong. She produces a thick folder of documents. I have evidence of your systematic discrimination against employees of color. I have recordings of your attempts to bribe Harvard University officials. I have documentation of your tax evasion schemes. And I have testimony from 17 employees who have been silenced by your non-disclosure agreements. Agreements that are now void because they were obtained through fraud. Blackstone leaps to his feet, his face red with rage. This is all lies. You're just a con artist trying to shake me down. Mr. Blackstone, Maya says calmly, you have just made a public statement that will be used against you in court. I suggest you stop talking and call your lawyer. But Blackstone is beyond reason. You people are all the same. You think you can use your race to get whatever you want. Well, I have news for you. I own this city, and I will destroy you. The cameras capture every word, every gesture, every moment of Blackstone's meltdown. His lawyers try to pull him away, but he shrugs them off and continues his tirade. You're nothing but a ghetto rat who doesn't know her place. I'll make sure you never work again. I'll make sure— Mr. Blackstone, Maya interrupts, her voice cutting through his ranting like a blade. I am not the ghetto rat you think I am. I am a Harvard Law graduate with a 3.9 GPA. I am the granddaughter of a federal judge. I am a civil rights lawyer who has spent her entire life preparing for this moment. And you, sir, are about to learn what happens when you underestimate the power of an educated black woman who refuses to back down. The room falls silent. Maya's words hang in the air like a challenge, and, for the first time since this ordeal began, Richard Blackstone looks genuinely afraid. The transformation of Maya Johnson from victim to victor begins with the slow, deliberate entrance of an elderly black woman wearing judicial robes. Eleanor Washington, retired federal judge Eleanor Washington, walks into the Golden Crown restaurant with the bearing of someone who has spent decades commanding respect in the highest courts of the land. The assembled crowd rises instinctively as she approaches the podium, and Maya steps aside to embrace her grandmother. But this is not the frail, beaten woman who had been ready to give up just days before. This is Judge Eleanor Washington, and she has come to deliver justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor's voice carries the authority of someone who has spent 40 years presiding over courtrooms. I am Eleanor Washington, retired federal judge for the district court. I have remained silent while my granddaughter fought her own battles because I wanted her to develop the strength that comes from standing alone against injustice. Today, she has proven that she possesses not only that strength, but the wisdom to use it properly. She turns to face Richard Blackstone, who has gone completely pale. Mr. Blackstone, you made a fatal error when you chose to target my granddaughter. You assumed she was powerless because she was working as a server. You assumed she was uneducated because she was black. You assumed she was alone because she was young. You were wrong on all counts. Maya steps forward, her voice now carrying the confidence of someone who has been underestimated for the last time. I could have revealed my identity at any point during your campaign against me, Mr. Blackstone, but I wanted to see exactly how far you would go. I wanted to document every illegal action, every abuse of power, every moment of your true character. She gestures to the back of the room, where a dozen people have quietly taken seats. I would like to introduce you to some people you might recognize. These are employees of your company who have been silenced by illegal non-disclosure agreements. These are students from universities where you have used your donations to influence academic decisions. These are victims of your discrimination who have been afraid to speak out. Until now, one by one they stand and identify themselves. A former executive who was fired for refusing to implement discriminatory hiring practices, a janitor who was subjected to racist abuse, a female engineer who was sexually harassed and then blacklisted when she complained. The list goes on, each testimony adding another layer to the case against Richard Blackstone. You see, Mr. Blackstone, Maya continues, I haven't just been preparing for this press conference. I have been preparing for the lawsuit that will follow. I have been gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and building a case that will not only seek justice for what you did to me, but for what you have done to dozens of other people over the years. Blackstone's lead attorney, a nervous man in an expensive suit, whispers urgently in his client's ear, but Blackstone pushes him away, his arrogance and anger overriding his judgment. You think you can intimidate me? He shouts. I have more lawyers than you have brain cells. I'll tie you up in court for years. I'll bankrupt you before you can even file your first motion. Maya smiles, and there's something in that smile that makes everyone in the room pay attention. Mr. Blackstone, I should mention that I won't be handling this case alone. My co-counsel includes some of the finest civil rights lawyers in the country. The Southern Poverty Law Center has agreed to provide support. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund is backing our case, and the Department of Justice has opened its own investigation based on the evidence I have provided. She pauses, letting that information sink in. But most importantly, I should tell you that your own private investigator has been cooperating with us for the past week. He became quite concerned when you asked him to plant evidence and intimidate witnesses. He's been recording your conversations, Mr. Blackstone. Would you like to hear some of them? The blood drains from Blackstone's face as Maya plays a recording of his voice. I don't care what you have to do. Plant evidence, threaten witnesses, burn the whole thing down if you have to. I want that black bitch destroyed. The room erupts in gasps and the frantic clicking of cameras. Blackstone's lawyers immediately begin trying to control the damage, but it's too late. The recording continues, revealing a pattern of illegal behavior that goes far beyond simple discrimination. There's more, Maya announces. We have documentation of your tax evasion schemes, your attempts to bribe public officials, your illegal campaign contributions. The IRS has been very interested in our findings. As if summoned by her words, 2 FBI agents enter the restaurant. They approach Blackstone with the calm professionalism of law enforcement officers who've been watching a case develop for weeks. Richard Blackstone, the lead agent says, you're under arrest for violations of federal civil rights laws, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The handcuffs click shut around Blackstone's wrists as the cameras capture every moment. The man who thought he could destroy Maya Johnson with his wealth and influence is led away in custody, his empire crumbling around him. Maya watches him go, then turns back to the assembled crowd. I want to be clear about something, she says, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. I am not celebrating the downfall of Richard Blackstone. I am celebrating the victory of justice over privilege, of truth over power, of courage over fear. She holds up the pendant that has been her talisman throughout this ordeal. My mother wore this pendant every day when she was fighting for civil rights. It represents the scales of justice, the idea that everyone deserves equal treatment under the law. Richard Blackstone believed that his wealth made him above the law. Today, he learned that justice doesn't recognize bank accounts or social status. The press conference ends with Maya announcing that all monetary damages from the lawsuit will be used to establish a foundation providing legal aid to victims of discrimination. The Eleanor Washington Foundation will ensure that no one else has to face this kind of systematic oppression alone, she declares. As the crowd begins to disperse, Maya stands in the same spot where she was humiliated 3 weeks earlier, but now she stands not as a victim, but as a victor, who has proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is a sharp mind and an unbreakable spirit. 6 months later, Maya Johnson stands in the same courtroom where her grandfather once presided, but now she wears the robes of an attorney representing the voiceless and the forgotten. The Eleanor Washington Foundation has already taken on 47 cases of discrimination, and Maya has become the face of a new generation of civil rights lawyers who refuse to accept that money and power can override justice. Richard Blackstone received a 5-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay $40 million in damages to his victims. His company declared bankruptcy, and his reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that he became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked privilege and racism. But Maya's victory extends far beyond one man's downfall. The case sparked a national conversation about discrimination in the workplace, the abuse of power by wealthy individuals, and the importance of having strong legal protections for victims of civil rights violations. The Golden Crown restaurant has become an unlikely pilgrimage site for young people inspired by Maya's story. They come to see the place where one woman's courage changed everything, where a server became a symbol of resistance, where justice proved more powerful than wealth. Maya keeps regular office hours at the foundation, providing free legal services to anyone who needs them. Her first client was a young Latina woman who was fired from her job for refusing to tolerate sexual harassment. Her second was an elderly black man who was denied housing because of his race. Each case is different, but they all share the same theme: ordinary people finding the courage to stand up to extraordinary injustice. Professor Williams, who was promoted to dean after his courageous support of Maya, speaks regularly about the importance of academic integrity and the responsibility of educational institutions to protect their students from outside pressure. Harvard University established the Maya Johnson Scholarship Fund, providing full tuition to students from disadvantaged backgrounds who demonstrate exceptional potential in law or public service. Eleanor Washington, now 81, has become a mentor to young lawyers and activists. She gives speeches at law schools and civil rights conferences, sharing the wisdom she has gained from a lifetime of fighting for justice. Her apartment is filled with letters from young people who have been inspired by Maya's story to pursue careers in law and public service. Marcus, who stood by Maya throughout the ordeal despite pressure from his family, completed his medical degree and now works at a free clinic in the same neighborhood where Maya grew up. They married in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, with Eleanor performing the ceremony as a retired judge. Their first child is due in the spring. The foundation's offices are located in a renovated building in the heart of the city, its walls lined with photographs of civil rights leaders and legal precedents that changed the course of American history. Above Maya's desk hangs a portrait of her mother, Sarah Johnson, wearing the same pendant that Maya now wears every day. But perhaps the most important legacy of Maya's victory is the message it sends to young people everywhere, particularly young women of color who face discrimination and prejudice in their daily lives. Her story has become proof that education, courage, and determination can overcome even the most powerful forces of oppression. Maya still receives letters from around the world, from people who have been inspired by her story to stand up for themselves and others. She answers each one personally, sharing the lessons she has learned about the importance of preparation, the power of truth, and the necessity of never giving up in the face of injustice. The pendant that belonged to her mother continues to serve as a reminder that justice is not something that happens automatically. It requires people who are willing to fight for it, to sacrifice for it, and to never accept that some people are above the law while others are beneath its protection. On the first anniversary of the press conference, Maya returns to the Golden Crown restaurant, not as a server this time, but as a guest speaker at a civil rights conference. She stands in the same spot where she was humiliated, where she was called names and told she didn't belong. And she addresses a room full of lawyers, activists, and young people who have been inspired by her story. Justice is not a destination, she tells them, her voice carrying the same quiet strength that first caught people's attention that night a year ago. It's a journey that requires constant vigilance, constant courage, and constant commitment to the idea that all people deserve dignity and respect. She looks out at the young faces in the audience, many of them black and brown faces that reflect her own, and she sees the same determination that once burned in her own heart. The question is not whether injustice will continue to exist. The question is whether you will be part of the solution or part of the problem. The question is whether you will stand up when it matters, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous, even when it seems like the whole world is against you. As she speaks, the pendant catches the light from the same chandeliers that witness her humiliation and her triumph. The scales of justice seem to shimmer, a reminder that while the arc of the moral universe may be long, it bends toward justice only when people like Maya Johnson are willing to grab hold of it and pull. The story of Maya Johnson and Richard Blackstone has become more than just a tale of personal triumph. It has become a template for how ordinary people can fight back against extraordinary injustice, how education and preparation can overcome wealth and privilege, and how sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is not more hatred, but the patient, methodical application of truth and justice. In the end, Maya Johnson's greatest victory was not destroying Richard Blackstone, but proving that, in America, the daughter of a dead civil rights lawyer and the granddaughter of a federal judge could still find justice, even when that justice seemed impossible to achieve. Her story continues to inspire new generations of lawyers, activists, and ordinary citizens who refuse to accept that some people are worth more than others, that some voices matter more than others. The scales of justice hang around Maya's neck as she finishes her speech, and in that moment they represent not just the law, but the enduring power of hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that right will ultimately triumph over might, that truth will ultimately triumph over power, and that justice will ultimately triumph over injustice, no matter how long it takes or how hard the fight may be.